I'm Karen Kimsey-House. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of the Coaches Training Institute, which is the world's largest in-person training organization for coaches.
How did you come to coaching?
I started coaching in 1988. I met someone who was a financial planner, and we began talking about life planning, and it went from there.
Good.
So I'm Carol Kauffman, and I'm an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and the director of the Institute of Coaching, which started because of a $2 million gift from Ruth Ann Harnish, who actually was my coach. But how I got into coaching, I was one of those people who really thought I was already coaching as a psychologist. I had a big private practice, training people, marathons, etc. So I went to a workshop, and I won it as a door prize. I won free tuition at Mentor Coach as a door prize. And after 2 hours of class, it was like, for me, it was like a near-miss car accident where I went, oh my goodness. I had no idea that this was completely different from therapy as usual. So it's been 10 years now, and I love it.
Can you explain to me what coactive coaching is?
Well, it's a particular approach to coaching that focuses on the integration of relationship and action. We believe that whatever we make or do together, we do in relationship with each other. So relationship, connection, context, hyphen, non-duality, and active, action, intention, purpose, and direction.
How did you develop this?
We made it up.
Okay.
Wait, I
Presumably
have to interrupt here. One of the things is that I think that the different models of coaching actually have a little bit more of a research base than people realize. Because what's happened recently in the American Psychological Association, for example, in Division 5, which is on statistics, is that it used to be all quantitative, and now they see the power of qualitative research. And in some ways, there's things called grounded theory and emergent process, which is where groups of people together talk with one another, get a sense of what works, then self-correct and see what more works. And they do that through a lot of collective conversation. So in some ways, I would say that kind of the core skills of coaching, because they keep surfacing in similar ways, are part of an emergent process research approach. And we're just now understanding that and being able to share that with them.
Well, now that you explain it so well, that's exactly what we did. We coached for a long time. We paid attention to what worked and paid attention to what didn't. We let go of what didn't work and we kept what worked. So we refined it and polished our approach over a long period of time. It sounds better when Carol says it.
Well, but if I put that together with your original definition, what I hear is that that experience gave you a very heavy focus on the relationship part that's necessary in the coaching relationship, and an emphasis there, which when you add that to other kinds of skills,
Right.
it gives you something very powerful.
Right, I think there's a tendency to focus on the result or the outcome or the direction that we want to move and forget about the relationship. I love listening to the talks this morning because there was such a heavy emphasis on the interaction between two human beings. I love Dr. Dan Siegel's word, mindset. I think that's beautiful because it really integrates the relational part with the direction or the creative part.
And if you look at psychotherapy research, and there's hundreds of studies, it really talks about the key factor is the relationship. And that's what makes therapy work, and I think we find that that's what makes coaching work.
What's exciting for me about it is Carol's vast experience with lots and lots of different research and evidence that supports the premise of coactive coaching. So I'd like people to know and understand that these 4 cornerstones create a philosophical foundation for a relationship-based approach to coaching, and to really have access to some of the data and research that supports that point of view.
Karen, can you talk to me a little bit about the 4 cornerstones of coaching?
Yes, they form a philosophical foundation for coaching. The first one is that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. They are not broken, they don't need to be fixed. They have the resources within them to resolve the challenges that they face. What they need is a place to look and good, powerful questions to encourage them to do so.
And it turns out that positive psychology has an enormous amount to say about that. So, you sort of hear hold people naturally creative, resourceful, whole. Yes, that's true. B, it works in coaching. C, there's a huge research that talks about it. Things, for example, about the Pygmalion effect. And there's a whole part of research actually called affect priming. Affect means emotion, and priming is you prime. So someone's about to take a test and say they're, blonde. One blonde comes in and you say, oh, blondes are really good at this. Another blonde comes along and you say, blondes aren't really that good at this. And then you take a test. Okay, this is done like a quadrillion times. Turns out that if I prime you with seeing you as
Blonde.
No, creative, natural, resourceful, and whole, then you do 1 grade better than if I see you as not resourceful and whole.
Yeah.
And so there really is something to it.
So when we hold people in this context, we design our world and we invite the best part of the people that we're working with forward.
Which is exactly what a strengths model is.
Yeah.
Okay, second cornerstone.
The second cornerstone is dance in this moment, which is really about the philosophical belief that value really gets created in the moment. We can learn from our past. It's good to orient towards the future, but being present in the here and now is where change and development really occurs.
Yes, every moment is the point in time. And on the research front, there's just enormous work being done now in mindfulness and the importance of being in the moment, how that sharpens your capacity to observe yourself and expands the kinds of decisions you can make. And what's happened now is even the whole field of science is now looking at complexity theory and how things are very complex and there's a system that's dancing, as it were, in any moment, and how can you learn to capitalize on it?
And create from what's present in the here and now rather than from a static set of beliefs or a static set of rules.
Third cornerstone.
The third cornerstone is focus on the whole person. I loved Dr. Dan Siegel's talk this morning because he was talking really about the whole human being, not just the brain or one aspect of it. And yet when we go to work with people, we tend to want to compartmentalize them and to think of them as a collection of parts rather than as a constellation, really a whole gestalt of a human being.
And we've talked a lot about how in science now we see people as, I can't even get it all out, bio, psycho, social, relational, spiritual beings. And in one of the master classes on the Institute of Coaching website, we talk about a model I came up with called PERFECT, which is looking at P, the physical, E, the environmental. What are you surrounded by? Your culture, your community, the organizational dynamics. R is your personal relationships. How are those resources, challenges, or as we saw today, how we exist in relationships. Then F for feelings, emotional intelligence, positive psychology. Then so PERF is feelings. E is effective thinking, looking at your cognitive style. Can you map how you're thinking to the challenge you're facing? C, continuity of past, present, and future. So we already have done present with mindfulness. C, continuity, how can you really learn from the past, but not getting stuck in the pain of it, but looking, my crucible experiences, what leadership lessons do I take from it? How do I see my future? And then finally, transcendence. How do you really take a spiritual, historical, and ego-free overview and really create a model that's for the whole person and how to have coaching interventions flow from that.
I love the model that Carol's created. It automatically points coaching to a really holistic focus and to working with the client in the whole of themselves and the whole of their world. So it maps right to this cornerstone.
Okay. Fourth cornerstone.
The fourth cornerstone is evoke transformation. Evoke means to call forth. I love this cornerstone because it puts me in a provocative state of mind. The idea that coaching really is about supporting people in growing and developing and evolving and changing and emerging consistently into their best self, which isn't a destination, but is an ongoing process.
And we've talked about that some people misinterpret now, or coaching up till now has really been, I won't say passive, but has been mostly about just sort of asking questions. Mm-hmm. And I think, Karen, as you're moving more into the leadership space, you're seeing that a little differently. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, I think that it's wonderful to provide a container or a space and ask great questions for people. That's the part of coactive. And I think it's also really important for coaches to take a stand. They have a responsibility, they have a role to play, and they're not just following their client around. They really are standing for and calling forth and demanding, actually, the client's best self. You know, sometimes we can get lost in our own story and our own nonsense. And part of the value of a coaching relationship is that it grabs a hold of the client and it points them towards that which is most dynamic and most positive for themselves, rather than being more passive. It really is an active approach to working with people.
And that works with positive psychology. We talk about an ideal ratio that brings out peak performance, and it's 3 sort of positives to 1 negative. And what we need in coaching is to remember the power of positive confrontation. The person is accepted, we really see them, and then also part of coaching is really challenging them.
It's part of the value of having a strong relationship. Once you have that foundation, a person feels safe and held, so you can challenge them positively and take them places that they might not be able to find or discover on their own. In my business at CTI, this isn't really an example of a coaching relationship. I use these skills all the time. Whenever any of the people that report to me and of our executive team experiences a failure, we have a term called celebrating failure, which doesn't mean that you have a party. It means that you acknowledge that there's been a failure, and then you roll up your sleeves and you dig in and look and see what's the learning that's available, what's the development opportunity for that individual. So when someone inside CTI has a failure, of course, we deal with the circumstances, but larger than that, we look at the evolutionary and developmental opportunity for the person involved.
So one example, in a way, of how seeing someone naturally creative, resourceful, and whole can impact in a tough situation is the 1-sentence vignette. It's a true story of a woman I was supervising, and her client sat down and said, "I'm an unfaithful husband, an absent father, and I'm at the lowest ebb of my life." Now you could say, and what's the coaching response to that, where I hold a person resourceful, whole, I dance in the moment, I evoke transformation? What this coach did, she said, "You're an absent father, unfaithful husband, absent father, and the lowest ebb of your life. Tell me, is that what you want to be? If your life looked the way you'd really like it to, what would that be like?" And if you think about it, it's just the person did not go, the person was invited to go to pathology, and she resisted, and she did evoke transformation.
Such an when I heard Carol talk about that example in the presentation this morning, my little coaching chops just got all excited, because when someone is at a low ebb like that, it's a chrysalis. It's the greatest opportunity for them to create the greatest change. So I love that the coach chose to really call forth what was possible and to have the client look, okay, this is how it is now. what's possible from here? There's a way that sometimes the challenges of our life, especially the more dramatic ones, provide the prime opportunity for the greatest transformation.
Well, the other thing that I pull out of it is that the coach did in this example exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
And that is, they did not put their own opinion, they didn't solution find, they didn't try to fix it, but they reflected in a challenging way that was useful.
Right.
So really good. We do tend in our membership to have some people who are newer to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend to them?
That they trust themselves and that they educate themselves. I think coaching is a really vast profession. And so you can begin working with an individual right away, trusting your own instincts. And at the same time, it's important to continue to develop yourself and educate yourself, particularly with all of the research and data that's available now about the efficacy of coaching. I would recommend that people dive right into that. What would you recommend to new coaches, Carol?
Well, I come from a different place, which is a lot of the coaches that I know are people who teach at business schools or who are psychiatrists or psychologists, and one day wake up and go, oh, I'm going to be a coach. So what I would say there is that coaching is really very different from these other professions, and that training is really, really important. So the first thing I would say to someone is, don't believe you already know this. Get yourself some good training.
I totally agree with the training piece. I just don't want new coaches to feel like they have to wait 4 years before they complete training to begin working with someone. The best combination is training along with practice. So I want people to be educated, but I also want them to be applying what they're learning right away and work with clients. That's where they're going to learn the most.
There's a tremendous amount of interest in recognizing the line between therapy and coaching, recognizing the difference and handling that. Do either of you have anything to say about that?
I'd be interested to hear I have a thought about it, but I'd like to hear you first.
Well, the way I think of the main difference between therapy and coaching, there's a lot of very simplistic models out there, like, therapy is about the past, coaching is about the future, but it's really a completely different orientation, a very different relationships. Coaching is a very unique environment where not only are you believing in the person, you're not diagnosing the person, and it's an egalitarian relationship. What I think of it is coaching, you follow the trail of dreams, and in therapy, we follow the trail of tears for healing. And it's not that one is better than the other. And the way I think of it is I imagine like there's a house of coaching and there's a house of therapy, and some of the rooms are very similar. But you can never forget which house you're in and what your intention is when you're working with someone.
I love the way that Carol has distinguished it. I think it's important, and I also think that it's challenging because there are many, many different approaches to coaching, and coaching can be quite therapeutic, and there are many, many different approaches to therapy, and most of the really great therapists that I've worked with have asked good coaching questions. I think that just to draw from what Carol said, the orientation of the practitioner and the person coming for services has everything to do with the distinction between coaching and therapy. I've used both in my life to excellent effect. And one, I was looking to heal, a more pathological approach, and the other I was looking to dream or to move forward. Both are powerful and useful.
Good. Where do you think the frontiers are of coaching? Where do you think it's going?
I have big dreams for coaching. I think that the profession of coaching has just begun to peak into the possibility for the future. It's still really in a pioneer phase. And so my vision for coaching in general is that many, many more people, and particularly people inside of organizations, can avail themselves of not just the coaching relationship, but of these humanistic, interactive, relational skills. And I think that there's great hope for a world where people can work together to resolve the problems that we face. And I think coaching provides a vehicle and a skill set for that, and a mindset for that. Perhaps that's the most important thing.
I think, well, first, we really want to see coaches grow, develop. We want to raise the bar on the profession and appreciation for what it can do. And I also think of something I call the 20% solution, which is if I'm a lawyer, financial planner, a teacher, a parent, if I knew 20% of what a professional coach knows, would I do my job 5 times better?
Right.
And so I want to see kind of coaching skills, you know, asking powerful questions, evoking transformation, believing in other people, become widespread in our community. And I would really like for a positive psychology and a coaching headset to permeate our culture. In the 1890s, the brilliance of Freud brought the unconscious into the world, and people were really informed in that language very deeply, very powerfully. And now it's the time for positive psychology and coaching to infiltrate into our entire mindsets, our language, and our perspectives. I'd like to see positive psychology and coaching in Shakespeare. You know, lots of dissertations, lots of thoughts, just, you know, where can this go to influence how the world thinks and behaves?
Well, imagine what would be different if there was just a small shift in people's perception and their ability to access and utilize this approach and these skills. It would create a dramatic shift in the way that we live and work together in our world. For example, there's lots of evidence now that leaders inside organizations, when adopting simple relational and coaching skills, are infinitely more effective. So think of an educator inside a classroom working with the young minds of tomorrow. What would open up or be different if he or she was able to utilize this mindset and this approach? Every aspect of our life, from parenting all the way through the way that we do business together, would shift if people were able to be just a little bit more relational. Listen, I love the 20% idea, listen 20% more effectively to each other.
And believe a little bit more in one another, and also be able to get to a place of empathy, which is where I know my story, and I know your story, and I know they aren't the same, but the active, and the hyphen, for example, how to really be able to integrate and move forward together rather than get stuck in one person's story or the other.
What we can create or design together is infinitely larger than what you or I might be able to create alone. So the sum of our parts is greater than the whole. I think of it as the third way, not your way, not my way, but the integration of the two of us together.